Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us today for another exciting WordStream and Perry Marshall joint webinar, the 80-20 Rule, Work Less and Make More in AdWords. My name's Chris, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. For today's agenda, we'll cover how the 80-20 principle works and why, and we'll also show you how to apply the lessons of the 80-20 to AdWords campaign management. We'll save some time for Q&A, so send us your questions. To introduce our speakers for today's webinar, we have a very special guest and our good friend Perry Marshall. He's the author of the most popular AdWords book in the world, #1 author of the world's most quoted consultant on Google advertising, and he's published thousands of articles on sales, marketing, and technology. So welcome, Perry, and thanks for joining us today.
It's good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and we'll do an interesting stir fry today for sure.
We also have on the webinar Larry Kim. He's the founder and CTO of WordStream, and he's been doing PPC and SEO for over 10 years. WordStream is the provider of the 20-minute PPC Work Week and the AdWords Grader. And recently, Larry won #1 PPC expert according to ppchero.com.
Thanks, Chris, and welcome, Perry.
If you want to take part in live blogging today, you can include the hashtag Perry Marshall on any of your social channels.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. So let's kick off some of the polls just to kind of figure out who's on the line today. I think our first question is, how long have you been using AdWords? And if you could just lock in your votes there, less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, and over 5 years. So, Perry, when did you get started in this again?
April 2002. So I guess it's been 11 and a half years.
Wow, we're dinosaurs here.
We're dinosaurs.
I was doing it before they even had AdWords. It was you would email Google a spreadsheet with keywords by email.
Man, that's impressive. Actually, you're the first person that's told me that, so you're in high cotton, man.
I got to meet the CEO of Google, and they took me out for lunch. It was a big deal back then. It was like a $1 million order back in 2001. But
wow,
that's not a big order these days.
Who were you? Were you with some company or?
Yeah, like some software company in America.
Okay.
Cool.
Fair enough.
So, can we show the results here to our attendees?
I can see it. Yeah, there we go.
Can someone recap that?
37% less than 1 year, 25% 1 to 2, 23% 3 to 5, and 15 over 5.
Right.
So we got a spread here.
It's like the 80-20 there. Did you see that the little chart there?
Something like that.
Well, and one other question for our audience today. Besides pay-per-click advertising, what other types of marketing channels do you utilize for your company? Select all that apply. Search engine optimization, email marketing, affiliate marketing, social media marketing, and mobile-specific marketing. So just lock in your votes. We'd love to see what other kind of things you're interested in. So it looks like SEO, email, and social media are the winners. Affiliate marketing seems to be pretty low. So that's great to know, and let's just push forward here. I think we've got a great presentation here. I'm going to hand things over to Perry, who's going to tell us the story of how he discovered this awesome, phenomenon of nature, and also kind of the implications of how this impacts your sales and marketing work. So take it away, Perry.
Yeah. So why don't you make me presenter, and I'll show my screen. But meanwhile, yeah, the 80-20 rule is people talk about it, and it's kind of this business thing that gets bandied about. But what I came to understand was that most people only have the most superficial understanding of 80-20. Now, some people don't really know what it is. It says that 80% of your results comes from 20% of what you do, and the other 20% of your results comes from 80% of your effort. But most people don't know how to translate that So Richard Koch, who's now a friend of mine, in fact, last week I was visiting him in Portugal, where he has one of his many homes. He wrote this book called The 80-20 Principle. It came out in '97, and I read it probably about 12 years ago. And when I read it, I got to page 14, and my mind set on fire. And he made these almost like throwaway comments, but I recognize the importance of them. And what I'm going to try to do today in the next few minutes is give you an understanding of why 80-20 is actually it's an infinite and limitless thing, rather than just being a, here's a group A and here's a group B. And so if you put 80-20 on a graph where the least effective things are on the left side and the most effective things are on the right side, it looks like this graph right here. Now ignore the yellow for a second. I'll get to what that is. But what you see here is that on the left side, I have a ranking of 500 things, and so 100 is in the top 20, and so top 20%. And what it says is that the area under this curve here, 80% of that area is to the right side of the 100 mark. And as you go up and up and up, that line just, that curve never touches the line on the right side. It just goes up and up incredibly high. And in fact, if we zoomed into just the part that you can't even see because it goes off the graph, and we zoomed in, it would once again look exactly like the curve that you see here. And so 80-20 actually, so if you ignore the bottom 80% and you just look at the top 20%, 80-20 is still true. And if you ignore the bottom 20% of that and you just look at the top 20, 80-20 is still true. And so what that means is that that 4% of what you do produces 64% of your results, and it means that 1% of what you do produces almost half of your results, and then it keeps going. So so I want to show you something. If you read in the newspaper that Southwest Airlines was doing $15 billion a year of sales, and that they are the 167th biggest company in the Fortune 500. Well, that's true. And if we put it on the Fortune 500 as a member of the Fortune 500, then there they are in this graph, and that yellow mark is at number 167. And so if we use just this data on Southwest Airlines to predict the size of all the other Fortune 500 companies, this is what you get. So if you look carefully, you've got the white line, which is theory, it's 80-20 theory, and you got the yellow line, which is the actual data of the Fortune 500. And as you can see there, it is remarkably close. Okay? So in other words, because 80-20 is true, and because 80-20 is a law of nature, and because it's not just a group A and a group B, but it's actually this curve, you can take one piece of data and you can predict the total revenue of the Fortune 500. You could predict accurately the size of company number 20 or company number 50 or company number 300, and it's all there. And we could do the same thing with the net worths of the Forbes 400, and those go on, I believe this is a 60-40 curve, not an 80-20, or maybe it's a 70-30. I don't remember exactly what it is, but you can see the white line is the ideal and the yellow line is the real world. We can plot the population of cities in the United States. and they follow this curve. This is a 70-30, so 70% of the population lives in 30% of the cities. That's what that tells you, and you can see how exactly it conforms. So basically, if you know the rank of one city and the size of that city, then you know the rank and size of every other city, and you're accurate to probably plus or minus 25% across the whole U.S. Donations to a church. The white line is theoretical and the yellow line is actual, and it's scary. Dairy output of counties in Wisconsin. The yellow line is the theory and the white line is the actual. So this ends up being true in so many places. If we said, well, what are the top 100 albums on the charts right now? How many they're selling would fit this curve. If we said, what are the top 100 songs? It would fit this curve, even though it's different data than the albums. If we said, what are the top 100 artists? Well, even though some artists have 5 albums and some of them only have 1, and even though they're going to be mixed around compared to all the other lists, it's still going to follow this curve. And so I came to understand this back. It was I'd been using AdWords for less than a year, and when I discovered 80/20 and I saw this, I was like, hey, wait a minute, this applies to AdWords, this applies to keywords. I quickly figured out that 95% of the traffic is 5% of the keywords, and so it was a 95-5 relationship. And then you could predict, well, how important, my number 10 keyword, how important is that going to be? And I came to understand that in AdWords there's all these levers, and so my entire approach to AdWords from before I even wrote any AdWords books was 80/20, and even though I only talked about 80/20 a little bit in the AdWords book, it really saturated all of the thinking. And so what I'm telling you is really the secret sauce, and it's why I wrote the 80/20 book. And so 80/20 gives you a completely different idea of equality. So most people, if they have 30 customers, they treat them all equal. And like, well, I'll call all of them once a year. I'll send them Christmas cards. I'll send them all the same Christmas gift, and they kind of treat them all equal. But the reality is that one of those customers is going to be 20% of your business, and 2 of them are going to be 20% of your business, and 4 are going to be the next 20%, and 8 are going to be the next 20, and 16 are going to be the actually 15 will be the next 20. And so if you've got 30 customers and you want to distribute your efforts for maximum results, then you give an equal amount of effort to 1 as to 2 as to 4 as to 8 as to 15. And that's how you do equality. Well, that's also how you do peel and stick in Google AdWords. You have an ad group with 1 keyword, and that 1 keyword might be 20% of your traffic. And then you have another ad group with 2 keywords, and those 2 might be 20% of your traffic. And you've got another one with 4 keywords, and that's another 20% of your traffic. And somewhere you've got this kind of orphan ad group, and it's got like 500 or 1,000 keywords, and it gets this small amount of traffic. And that's the peel and stick technique, which is peel the keyword out, stick it in a new ad group, and write special ads just for that keyword. This shows the equality, so to speak, of your ads in your landing pages. You'll probably have 1 ad that's 20% of your entire business, and then you'll have 15 ads over here on the other side where those, each one only gets like 1% of your business. And so if you can think this way instead of the normal way that you're taught to think, that is how you actually appropriately parcel out your time. So it's actually a power law pattern. So the power law says that as you go from if you have 10 customers giving you 1,000, for every 10 of those you'll get one giving you $10,000. And so like a small consulting company, like those of you, for example, who do AdWords management, probably you might have said to yourself, well, I'm going to get 10 $1,000 clients, and I'm going to manage their AdWords, and I'm going to make, $120,000 a year, charging them all $1,000 a month. Well, if you packaged yourself and presented yourself that way, you probably are leaving a bunch of money on the table, because for every 10 people that'll give you 1,000, there's one that'll give you 10,000. So what you should really be doing is you should be, if you want to make $10,000 a month, you should have like one client who pays you, $6,000, and then have 6 clients that pay you $600, and that's kind of the idea. And it's a very different approach. So I'm almost done, and I'm going to turn this over to Larry. But first, I want to mention that everybody's seen bell curves, and everybody's taken a test in school, and the teacher came and said, well, you guys, the average got a 70. The average was 77, and this many people got A's, and this many people got B's, and most people got C's, and so on. That's the typical approach, but that's the wrong approach for everybody else besides the teacher. Because if, like, for example, if this is a science test, you want to know who's good at science, and you want to know how good they are. Well, this only tells you how many people got a certain score, but if you want to know how good people are at science, you put them on an 80-20 curve. And now it looks like this. So if I get 100 students and they all, took a test, and we line up these students in terms of their skill level, if the average student can do 77%, or like 77 science horsepower, the number one student has 1,500 science horsepower, and he can do more science better than the bottom 20 students in the class combined. And most things are this way. Not everything, but most things. So in my live seminars, I do this little exercise, and I go, okay, stand up if you own shoes, and then sit down if you own less than 5, and sit down if you own less than 10. And if I have a room full of 100 people, there's always like 2 women who own 100 shoes each, because 80% of the shoes are owned by 20% of the people. So the last thing I want to mention before I go on to the Google AdWords and turn it over to Larry is we took this 80-20 curve, and we made a tool, and it's at 8020curve.com. And the manual for using this tool is really the book, which you can get for a penny at 8020 sell8020.com. If you go to sell8020.com, penny plus $6.99 shipping and handling will send you this book. But it enables you to plug numbers in and make predictions. And so, like, if you have 10 customers who all gave you $1,000, it will tell you how many of them will give you $5,000 and how many will give you 3,000. And so you can use that tool. So I'm going to go back to Larry and can make Larry the presenter, Chris, and we'll keep having this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Perry. Hopefully you can see my screen here. You know, Perry, I got to say I was reading your book yesterday at like 3 in the morning. It's just reading through this thing. It was a really, really interesting book, and I think one of the reasons why it was so interesting was that it kind of put into words kind of phenomenon that I had observed but not fully explored, and so. Thank you for that, and listeners, I think this is like the one book you've got to read, this year, if you're reading anything in sales and marketing. Basically, this 80-20 phenomenon that Perry's been explaining to us for the last few minutes, it's everywhere in nature, including in your AdWords account, and there's powerful takeaways from this principle in terms of how practical takeaways of how you actually go about implementing your AdWords campaign management strategies and how to be more effective at doing that. And so that's kind of the subject of my discussion here, and we'll have Perry weighing in on these different phenomenon. But basically, guys, what I was doing here in preparation for the webinar was just trying to figure out, where are these 80-20 curves in my AdWords account, and what can I do about them in terms of what to focus on in your AdWords account. Now, you see, when you log into AdWords, there's probably like 1,000 features there that you can tweak this or tweak that, and there's a million different things that you could do, like raise your bids or change your keywords or try some extensions, etc. So there's so many different things that if you were really really wanted to, you could focus your full time 80 hours a week working on AdWords campaign management. Now, most of you guys have other stuff to do other than just full-time AdWords, and so the question was, could we leverage this this principle in terms of trying to figure out where we should be focusing our energy and attention to in our campaign? And so for this exercise, what I did was I took a client account that was spending roughly $500,000 in paid search per year, and I just tried to graph out, at a very high level, where is the spend within an account. So this particular, account, was spending, had 21 campaigns, and sure enough, 19% of the campaigns represented 78.8% of the spend. Now that's as close as you can get to 80-20. It was scary. It was just like really a chilling, getting towards this whole idea that the 80-20 rule is fractal in nature, meaning like Perry was saying that 4% controls 64%. Like we as you drill down, you definitely see still these numbers holding up, but not as much, not as strong though, because I felt like it seemed more like a 70-30. Like, did you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah. So it's not the numbers 80 and 20 that are the point, even though that's like the most common pattern that you see. It could be 70-30, it could be 60-40, it could be 90-10, it could be 95-5. Sometimes it's even 99-1. Like 99% of what you get comes from 1% of what you do. So it can vary, and it depends on some things that we don't have time to get into. But the point is that it's symmetrical in that when you drill down, you see the same pattern all over again. So like what you're showing now, Larry, is exactly the same as my curve. It's just flipped around backwards, where you've got the strongest ones on the left and the weakest ones on the right. But it's that same basic pattern. And real world data is usually not going to exactly match it. But if you can recognize the pattern, that it's always there, and then walk into a situation and look for it, like, okay, so there's like 100 things I could pay attention to here, but there's only 10 of them that are really important, so which 10 are they? And you already know in advance that those 10 probably represent 3/4 of what's actually going to happen. And you could ignore the other 90 and you're not missing much.
Of course. So point taken, and I think intuitively from looking at this first slide, I was thinking, wow, if I only have 10 minutes a week to spend on AdWords, which is, by the way, more than the average person spends in AdWords, but intuitively it would seem that I should be focusing on these 3 campaigns and ignoring the rest of the account, like just in order to prioritize my time, because your time's not free. However, I did a deeper dive, looking at the same campaigns and trying to figure out where the conversions came from. And so, like, one campaign was generating 1,200 conversions, etc. Like in terms of the say leads generated by the different campaigns. We saw a similar relationship. 68.4% of the conversions came from 19% of the campaigns, and so on. If you drill in, you saw similar patterns. But there was a bit of a disconnect in terms of the campaigns that were spending the most weren't the same as the campaigns that were generating the most conversions. So different, meaning different campaigns had different average cost per lead. And so, putting these two ideas together in terms of like where should I focus my time, I was thinking like, well, on one hand you want to focus where the money is going, on the other hand you want to focus where the leads are coming from. I came up with something, where to optimize at a high level, focus on big spending campaigns with sort of the CPAs that are furthest away from the average CPA. So that was kind of what my thoughts were here. Anything to add, Perry?
Well, I think you're right. When we invented peel and stick a long time ago, I said, well, what do you peel and stick? Well, stuff that sticks out, or stuff that you can tell needs some individual attention and is worthy of the individual attention. So yeah, everybody's got some leak in some bucket somewhere, and find the biggest leak and patch it up.
Awesome. So just pushing forward here. So within that top campaign that was represented something like a third of the spend and approximately that much of the conversions, I wanted to drill in and look at the keywords within that campaign. And again, we have this 80-20 thing showing up. 86% of the spend came from 20% of the keywords within the account. So so it just keeps showing up again. But the conversions were being disproportionately accrued to 20% of the keywords. So 92% of the conversions came from just 20% of the keywords. And again, there was big differences in terms of average cost per action per keyword. They varied, plus or minus, 50% in terms of like there was a distribution. And so the question I was thinking here of like what's the key takeaway for keyword expansion as it's a very critical AdWords campaign management task. What can 80-20 tell us about how to be more effective in terms of our keyword expansion? And I came up with a couple ideas here. Well, first is to try out as many keywords as you can, because most of them are going to be losers. Meaning for every 20 or 50 keywords you pick, only one will be that winner. And so the idea was to try out different keywords and see how they do. But at the same time, I think you need to watch those keywords that you're testing very closely, because if you do hit the number, there are certain keywords that can spend very quickly, as you saw in that picture. So much of the spend was concentrated on such a small number of the keywords, and so it's as you're doing this testing, you need to keep an eye on the losers and cut them loose if they're just spending and not converting according to your goals. And the third thing that I thought of here was there's almost no benefit to hanging on to those, the 80% of the less productive keywords in terms of the conversion benefits. And so there definitely is a cost in terms of management complexity if you have millions of keywords within your campaigns. It just makes it really difficult to manage and report on. And so you might be better off deleting the keyword clutter. The key here is that you don't necessarily know ahead of time which keywords are going to be the winners. And so the long tail is still important, that you keep on trying out different things, but once you've kind of ascertained a winner or a loser, or a keyword that just does nothing, to act on that and either cut them loose or keep them or delete them. Would you agree or add anything to this, Perry?
Well, there's only one caution, which is sometimes you have keywords that that people type in when they're thinking about a purchase, and then there's these other keywords that come up when they get close to buying, and sometimes if you don't catch them early, then you end up not catching them at all. So that's kind of an advanced AdWords thing, and it's something you have to be aware of, but you can lump keywords into groups, and you can shut them off in groups, and you can see if it affects your conversions, even if the conversions aren't being assigned to them. So I think as long as you're aware of this, you are going to be okay.
Awesome. So just drilling into the campaign structure a little bit more, another key top 5 kind of optimization tactic is ad testing for your text ads. And I drilled into this guy's account, and lo and behold, same story. 20% of the ads generated 92% of the spend. 20% of the ads generated 65% of the impressions. But again, you had different varying conversion rates between ads, varying cost per action between ads, and varying click-through rates. So how do you take all this data and try to focus on which ads to work on? Because on one hand, there's a lot of leverage in focusing on ads that are generating a lot of impressions, because there's opportunity for some of those impressions to be turned into clicks. Alternatively, you could be looking at the spend, because that's where you're actually spending money, etc. So is there a way to factor in all these different signals and kind of come up with a way of prioritizing your effort? And so what I came up with here was a couple takeaways. Idea number 1 was to prioritize ad testing. It's a lot of work. Like an account could have hundreds of ads, and so it's a lot of work to replace them all. And so if you were to prioritize just the ads with the most impressions with a below average conversion or click-through rate metric, I think that is where you would find a lot of leverage in terms of return on time spent. A workflow for doing this kind of in a way that wasn't really taxing in terms of taking forever would be to periodically look into your account and look for the ad with the most impressions with below average conversion or click-through rate metrics, and replace that worst ad with a new contender, a new ad to try out. And so I think that also reduces the risk, because sometimes your ads do great and sometimes they don't do so great. And so by replacing the worst, you're kind of mitigating some of that testing risk. An alternative way to think about ad testing, and this is directly from Perry's book, so I can't claim this as my own idea, but it's to people seriously underestimate how many ads or how many different kind of ads that it takes to find a winner. They write 1 ad or 2 ads and things like, oh, gee, my second ad isn't working. This AdWords must be broken. But the stats show us that roughly 1 in 50 ads is like this huge winner. And so, the idea here is just to write a lot of ads and try out a lot of different, like truly different ads, not just like adding a comma or a period, but actually trying out different unique selling propositions or a guarantee or an offer, and see what resonates. Anything to add or change here, Perry?
Well, when you're buying traffic, you're not just buying traffic, you're buying opportunities to test. And if you don't test different ads, you're actually squandering one of the biggest resources that you paid money for, because everybody else is testing to some extent. The very best people in your market are testing, even though most of them don't, right? So Larry goes, well, the average person spends less than 10 minutes a week. Yeah, but the super achiever above average people in your market, they might be spending an hour or two or maybe more. So like if you just keep putting new ads as inputs into the system, then you really have something. And it's a very important thing to be doing.
I'm reminded of this guy Jack Welch who ran GE, and his idea was to just every year fire the bottom 10% of his company. I'm not advocating for that, by the way, but you should be definitely periodically deleting and replacing the worst performers, and this is a very highly leveraged optimization activity. Like if you just have a few minutes to spend here.
Absolutely.
So. We're just moving through the different AdWords kind of points of leverage here, and of course we have to talk a little bit about landing page optimization. Now, landing page optimization, it's gets a lot of attention. Obviously, it's a very important last stage within your conversion funnel and everything like that. But people always ask me questions like, do I need a different landing page for every ad group? Or is it one per campaign good enough? And so what I was doing here is I drilled into different ad groups within this advertiser's account, and what I saw was that 20% of the ad groups received 85.6% of the clicks, and as usual, the distribution for the cost per click and the click-through rate and the cost per action for those different ad groups were, it didn't necessarily follow this pattern, but they were all over the place. So how do you know which, where creating a landing page, a new offer, that's not free. It takes time and effort to think of like a new offer. Where should you be focusing that time and energy on landing page creation for maximum benefit? And so the key takeaway from looking at this data was the realization that certainly not every ad group really requires its own dedicated landing page. As you saw, there were certain high priority, like high traffic ad groups that were soaking up the lion's share of the traffic there. And so for those ad groups, I would definitely prioritize creating specific offers that are like really just blow you away, kind of like amazing offers for those highly trafficked landing pages with below average conversion or cost per action metrics. For the rest of them, you can kind of get away with basic offers that are just okay or good enough. Anything to add here, Perry?
So in 80-20, anytime you take resources away from the bottom 80% and you put them into the top 20 and the top 5%, what happens is it's almost like everything, it's like you move up and you get a promotion, and all of a sudden you get more top 1% stuff to work with. So like the way that, so let's say you've got a couple of ad groups and they generate almost all of your traffic. Well, that means that those ad groups give you the opportunity to test even more ads. So if you use that bandwidth and all that traffic you're getting to test more stuff, then that means those ad groups improve faster than your slow ad groups, and which brings you even more opportunities, right? Which means you can also test landing pages faster. And so what will happen is there'll be these tiny parts of your ad campaigns. It's 3 or 4 keywords maybe, or maybe less than 10 keywords, and a handful of ads, and 1 or 2 key landing pages that generate this huge amount of traffic. And when you improve that, you improve your bounce rate, you improve your quality scores, then Google gives you more impressions, and they move you higher in the rankings, and they charge you less for the clicks, and now you can take that profit and you can reinvest it in more places. And so you're always either in an upward spiral or you are in a downward spiral. And once you start to catch that upward spiral, boy, that you're just at the beginning. So now you need to pour more in so you can go up, up, up that curve.
So just to wrap up this discussion here, I wanted to think about just the time and effort that people spend on PPC campaign management. Now, we actually have a really interesting way of benchmarking this because we work with thousands of different advertisers, and so we can kind of look through the AdWords activity logs. So like in the AdWords interface, there's a change history log that shows like every keyword that you've ever changed, every ad that you've ever added, edited, or deleted, every new campaign, etc. So we have this nice way of looking at how much work do people actually do in their PPC accounts, and are they working on it every day or every month or once a year? And so basically the great news here is that the bar is very low in terms of how much time is required to be in the top % of most active small business advertisers. Just 20 minutes per week or even 10 minutes a week, optimizing your time, your AdWords accounts in any of the ways that we talked about in terms of like prioritizing, just one ad, replace the worst one, or add some new keywords and test them, etc. Like just doing one change, one thing a week over a quarter would put you in the top 1%, and the 53% of the 53rd percentile would be people doing optimizations basically once per quarter. So again, the bar is really low here. And anything to add, Perry?
Yeah, 10 years ago when AdWords was still a Wild West, AdWords was a sprint. It was like, okay, how much can I just throw into this thing in the next 3 weeks, and 3 weeks later, like, you could be on top. Well, now I would say what's more normal is you spend 3 months. You might not get there in 3 weeks. It might take you 3 months, especially if you're in a really competitive market. But you just keep chipping away at it and chipping away at it. And pretty soon, you start earning compound interest on all these improvements.
So let's just try to wrap this up here in terms of the significance of the 80-20 rule as it applies to campaign management. As I was saying earlier, I think there's millions of possible things that you can do on AdWords, and you could spend 80 hours a week working on it if your heart desired. Obviously, as you can see by the data today, some of it will have a big impact. Others are negligible, and so just being mindful of that your time is not free, and applying yourself. It's how you spend the time, how you prioritize the different activities that matter. Not just doing keyword expansion, but doing it in a kind of 80-20 aware way. Barry?
It's all 80-20. If you're not doing 80-20, what that means is you're spending a lot of time on an 80% that's only generating 20%, which means it's better spent somewhere else. And so, if you've exhausted every last, bit of traffic, and you've squeezed every ounce of conversion out of it, well, then it's time to develop some new products and go into some new markets, right? So it never ends. but it sure does make you a lot of money when you actually do 80-20.
Awesome. So with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the offers for our audience today. The first one's from WordStream. So it's a chance to grade your AdWords account using the free AdWords grader. It's basically an instant PPC audit that takes just a minute to generate. It'll grade the performance of your AdWords account based on 8 PPC metrics that really matter, and it will kind of give you a really good heads-up comparison in terms of how you stack up against other companies within your industry spending, similar size budgets in terms of monthly spend as your company. WordStream's a software product company. We have a 20-minute PPC Work Week paid search campaign, which, by the way, was it's inspired by a lot of the observations that Perry has successfully kind of articulated within his book about the need for focusing on the 20%. We call it the 20-minute PPC Work Week. The way that it works is it just, as you can see on the right here, it just gives you 10 things to work on in a week. We'll find kind of the low-hanging fruit with the most impact, and in fact, some of the algorithms look very similar to how what we were talking about earlier in the talk today. But basically, it's just you just review and approve the findings, and the idea is it's very simple and easy to use. We also have a new landing page and lead management software program for hosting and allowing you to database the leads that get generated through your PPC lead generation campaigns. So at this point, we've got Chris, you want to talk about the offers here?
Sure. So the only offers we have on the screen right now is one is a free live demo of WordStream's PPC Advisor. So Larry just kind of briefly discussed it, or nothing at the moment. So we have these offers. So we'll leave this poll question up. We'll go right into questions. But just want to remind everybody to check out the AdWords Performance Grader, and also if you want to get a copy of Perry's book, to go to sell8020.com. So let's get right into questions here. Thank you everyone for sending your questions in. The first question is, at what point do you determine which high spending keywords are worth keeping and which ones to delete?
Well, it's all based on conversion tracking. So, let's say that you've got a product and you're willing to spend $100 per conversion. And let's say that you've done everything as best you know how, and now you've spent $200 or $300 and you haven't gotten a conversion. Well, probably at first, conversions are going to cost you more than you want them to, and then they're going to get better with testing. Now, I don't know what you think, Larry, but I think usually by the time you've spent 2, 3, 4, 5 times more than you're willing to spend, and you've done reasonably good best practices, then maybe that keyword is just a dud.
So I would add to that, the starting point is either the maximum cost per action that you're willing to pay and some multiple, like Perry just said. Another way you can do this is you take the average cost per action of, say, your campaign or your account, and just use that as the benchmark. Like, I'm already getting leads for $20, so this new campaign, I'm going to be willing to spend up to $40 initially, and if it blows through $40 and still no conversions, that's when you cut it loose.
Great. Thanks, guys. The next question we have here is, for small local businesses, the numbers to work with are limited. Test results are long coming. Any advice here?
So I think the principles of 80-20 are timeless. Like you're gonna still see the same kind of phenomenons. It's just gonna take longer for it to accrue data. So even with a limited data set, I think you should still see certain keywords as winners and others as losers. Like, would you agree, Perry? Is Perry still with us?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was talking to nobody.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah,
80% of your keywords are not going to work the way that you want them to. And, a few of them are really going to be gems.
Right. Next question.
Sure. So is it better to run a single ad copy per ad group with more specific keywords or multiple ad copies per ad group to see which one performs better?
I don't even think it matters. Like, I think what this research is telling me is that it matters more about how many clicks and impressions that the specific keyword has to be is driving than it does, the number of keywords. Meaning that the decision on, like, should I, group these together or peel and stick this keyword, like, I think it's driven entirely based on where that keyword is in sort of like the 80-20 hierarchy,
Okay, great. This other question we have here, and this kind of relates to a few questions we had back. Other than the conversions, how do you define the winner and losers for keywords?
There's many different metrics that you can use. You can use an absolute metric, such as a target cost per conversion that and your ability to beat or not beat that metric. A lot of companies, they're not as sophisticated. Maybe they don't have all this cost conversion tracking set up, in which case there's many proxy metrics that you can use in terms of one step removed from conversions. So, for example, that you could optimize for cost per click. That's making the assumption that all clicks are worth the same, which is rarely the case. But if in the absence of conversion data, that's a proxy. And another proxy I've seen people use is optimizing for click-through rate, because the click-through rate could be a proxy for relevancy in terms of like this is resonating with the target customer, and thus might be more valuable. But of course, I would not recommend either of those proxy metrics unless there's absolutely no way that you could use conversion tracking.
Great. So I think we have enough time for one last question. We're getting a lot of questions in here, so definitely feel free to give us a call on if you have any specific questions, or we like to follow up with a nice blog post after we do these webinars. So keep an eye out for that. The question is, what to do when a keyword is costing you clicks, not converting. However, it could be generating a phone conversion, but AdWords will only allow you to drill down to an ad group level. Is there any way to find out if a keyword is productive within the ad group?
Here, the 80-20 rule applies to the ad groups. So, because the phone tracking, the call conversions, if you can only see them at the ad group level and not the individual keyword, then your mobile, you can't get any more granular than the data that they're providing you, and so I would just be prioritizing your mobile optimization efforts in terms of which ad groups are driving the most mobile conversions and which have the highest share of mobile traffic, rather than trying to make up data that wasn't there.
Well, my answer is, if you're doing peel and stick properly, if you're doing it properly, you end up with it's the same as that little picture of the little customers. There's the 1, 2, 4, 8. If you can peel and stick your keywords that are spending the most money into separate ad groups, and if your call tracking only gets you down to an ad group, then you're going to be reasonably close to an accurate answer, even if you don't have a perfect answer.
Cool. Hey, Chris, can you close the poll and so we can advance to the next screen here?
Sure. All set, Larry.
So I think that wraps up our webinar for today. Thanks so much, everyone on the line, for joining us today. Just a reminder, you can get Perry's 80/20 book that we were talking about for a penny at www.sell8020.com, and you can get a free report card for your AdWords account at www.wordstream.com/Google-AdWords. And any questions, you can of course contact Perry or myself on Twitter or with the contact information on the screen. So that's a wrap, guys. Thanks a lot, Perry.
Thank you, and yeah, take advantage of this book. It'll change your life, and I really appreciate you, Larry, having me on today. It's a privilege.
Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Adios.